So anyway, let me see if I understand this correctly. Trump is a fascist Nazi dictator, and yet his win makes you optimistic for the country, and the supporters of the fascist Nazi dictator are not your enemies? They're your brothers and sisters? Is that it, Cenk? You're optimistic that Hitler himself was elected? And you want to unite with Hitler's supporters? You want to unite with literal, actual Nazis? So what are you, coming out as a Nazi sympathizer? Is that what's happening?
Hello, everybody. How are you doing today? Today we have Matt Walsh. Yes, I am going back with some more Matt Walsh stuff. But Matt Walsh actually agrees with me. I have been saying for the past couple weeks that this new light under Cenk of reason is actual crap, and Matt Walsh is under the same impression. So why don't we sit back and listen, because Matt Walsh isn't buying Cenk's come-together grift at all.
I think the best way to explain my concerns is to point to another one of these newly minted voices of reason. This one also comes to us courtesy of the Young Turks. In fact, it is the creator of the show, Cenk Uygur. Now, Cenk has been a passionate, some would say vicious, unhinged, hysterical critic of Trump and MAGA and conservatives generally for many, many years. And yet, 2 weeks ago, he tweeted that he is now somehow feeling optimistic after the guy he despised and the movement he has opposed with his whole heart and soul just won. He wrote, quote, "I've been trying to figure out why I'm more optimistic now than I was before the election, even though I was so against the guy who won. I know now. MAGA is not my mortal enemy, and neither is the extreme left. My mortal enemy is the establishment, and they have been defeated." Now, despite being a far-left commentator who has demonized conservatives for literally decades, he now says that MAGA is not his enemy. The establishment is his enemy. In other tweets and comments, he's called for unity between the two sides. He's criticized the extreme left, or as he now apparently calls them, the max left, and has assured us that if the folks on both sides can unite against the villainous establishment, we will be invincible. Last week, he appeared on the PBD podcast to explain this new approach, which he won't really admit is a new approach, but even so, here you go.
Here's what my left-wing friends don't understand. They think you guys are all MAGA, and MAGA means it's a cult, and you're never going to disagree with Trump, you're never going to disagree with each other, and that you are...
I mean, right now, okay, you can already tell that either Cenk is not paying attention or he's lying. Okay, go on YouTube right now, and I bet you will find a couple of 2A guys right now who aren't real happy with Trump and some of his picks.
Like their father's Republicans, but you're not their father's Republicans, and so our side, I've been trying to get them to realize that Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, all these folks that take the money, they're not on your side, they're on the establishment side, right? And guys, today I think that we could do something historic. I think that we could actually unite the left flank and the right flank, and I've got a model for how to do that, and I want to run it by you guys. Before, when I battled the right wing, it was a wall. Right? I'm just like, nobody's listening to one another. They're just doing talking points. I hated it. And then MAGA looked like they were 100%. I'll be honest. I mean, in 2020, I was super pissed. And I said, look, I don't want to talk to Trump supporters. All I hear is the same thing. Trump, 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 Trump. And they never waver. So what I'm saying to the left now is, no, I'm seeing something new and different here. The MAGA base has changed. Okay, that doesn't mean they don't like Trump. It doesn't mean that they're not right-wing. But there is a significant portion of the MAGA base now that is, in my opinion, right-wing populists who are actually anti-establishment, actually anti-corruption, actually anti-war. And what I'm trying to tell the left is, take the win! Take the win!
Okay, from the very beginning, Trump supporters have been anti-establishment. From the very beginning, we've been anti-war. All right? This is Cenk, okay? Hoping that you forgot, okay? Because, again, as I've said before, most leftists blink their eyes and think it's another day, all right? And he's just basically doing a pivot to gather more, to basically capture more people because he knows he's going to start losing people.
We've been standing opposed here for 20 years, trying to cut the Pentagon, trying to be anti-war, getting money out of politics. If people say yes, for God's sake, that's our lost tribe. Those are our right-wing brother and sisters who are Americans, who are populists, who agree with us. Let's go fight the establishment together, because if we're united, they cannot stop us.
Brothers and sisters. Very nice sentiment. Cenk says that he has a plan. In fact, he said in the interview he had a plan to unite us all. He's all about unity. And he says that the MAGA base has changed. Now it is actually anti-establishment, anti-corruption, and anti-war. But, there are some rather significant problems here. And the first and most obvious is that the MAGA base has always been anti-establishment, anti-corruption, and anti-war.
Preach, brother, preach.
Those have been, by far, the defining features of the base from day one. But Cenk pretends that this was only a recent development so that, again, he can avoid actually admitting that he was wrong. In fact, he goes further. He takes credit. He pretends that the MAGA base has come to him, that this is a left-wing win, basically. Now, the other problem, and it's a big one, is that Cenk extends this olive branch to Trump's supporters and praises them for their stand against corruption and war. But here's what he was saying about Donald Trump as recently as last October.
He's a dictator. He's a fascist. That's not hyperbole. So, and here I'll upset a bunch of people on the left. Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley are not fascists. They're terrible people for other reasons, but they've never done a coup against America. They don't use direct Nazi quotes that Trump does.
You use direct Nazi quotes as well, Cenk. Okay, it's inevitable. Okay, when you are speaking in public, okay, to use certain phrases that are going to be consistent among a lot of ideologies. All right, it just happens that way. Okay, this is how the left tries to tries to nail the right. Okay, as Nazis. All right, when in effect the left uses just as much lefty verbiage, just because that political verbiage is just consistent along political lines. But again,
the only fascist that is an actual threat to democracy is Donald J. Trump. He already tried to end this democracy once. And guys, last thing. The other day, he said, immigrants are poisoning the blood of our nation. That quote has only been used by Adolf Hitler and Donald J. Trump. So he's telling you ahead of time, I'm a Nazi. It's not like I didn't warn you. I used absurd Hitler quotes. I pulled them out of history and I said them for no reason, just to let you know I am a Nazi.
All right, by the way, that was an interview that Cenk did when he was running for president, because apparently he ran for president. Now, I follow politics for a living. I literally never heard that he ran for president. Not once did that news cross my radar. So, in other words, the run did not go very well, I think is you may be surprised to learn. So, anyway, let me see if I understand this correctly. Trump is a fascist Nazi dictator, and yet his win makes you optimistic for the country, and the supporters of the fascist Nazi dictator are not your enemies? They're your brothers and sisters? Is that it, Cenk? You're optimistic that Hitler himself was elected? And you want to unite with Hitler's supporters? You want to unite with literal, actual Nazis? So what are you, coming out as a Nazi sympathizer? Is that what's happening? Now, you might say that I'm not being very charitable. Now, after all, that was a year ago. Now, granted, I could probably find about 300 examples of Cenk calling Trump Hitler in the last 2 months, but I didn't feel like spending that long watching Cenk clips on YouTube, so this is the one we're going with.
it is a trial, really. I mean, if you have to listen to that much Cenk Uygur, it wears on you, okay? I have a few more gray hairs. I'm serious.
Maybe there aren't any clips more recent than that. I don't know. Maybe Cenk had this conversion experience and became a reasonable moderate right after that segment was recorded. Maybe he's been a reasonable person for a whole year. Now, that would mean he spent 53 years of life as a left-wing crackpot and 1 year as a rational human being. That's good enough, isn't it? Why should we listen to him and embrace him as a thought leader? Okay, so let's not reach all the way back into the ancient past of 14 months ago. What if we went back 3 days or 1 day before that interview with PBD that we saw earlier, at the beginning? 3 days ago, Cenk was on his show condemning me for the speech that I gave at the Do No Harm rally outside the Supreme Court on Wednesday. Now, in this speech, I condemn the abuse of children and the ideology that promotes it. I say that this ideology must be entirely defeated. I use the word erase in direct reference to the ideology, not to the people, but to the ideology. And I say that about the ideology because it is an ideology that rejects basic reality and promotes and carries out the horrific medical abuse of children. Now, Cenk didn't much like what I said, and it didn't make him feel very unified, apparently. I don't think I'm one of these brothers and sisters of his, it turns out. Watch.
So in this case, the ACLU lawyer you're talking about, I love that the brother set history there and is the first trans person to argue in front of the Supreme Court. That's a great day in America. Just another stepstone in equality, right? Now, at the same time, he was on TV the other day saying 2-year-olds know if they're trans. And I'm like, that's nuts, totally nuts. 2-year-olds don't know anything. 2-year-olds often don't know their names. How do they know if they're trans and ready for hormones? Are you nuts? So I don't agree with him on that at all. I don't know why he would say such an absurd thing, right? Okay.
Yeah, listen, Cenk, listen, okay? Because they've been saying that absurd crap for a long time now.
Now let's go to the Max Right and the clip we just showed you. Far, far worse. Talking about what? They're not going to stop until trans ideology is entirely erased from the earth. Now, when you talk with that kind of language, what do you think that trans people are going to think? It sounds like you're trying to wipe them off the face of the earth. Like, don't tell me that this is just about, hey, a disagreement about puberty blockers, because we're about to have that conversation. That's not the conversation you're having. You and Marjorie Taylor Greene, when you say it's satanic, are having a conversation about how we should all hate trans people and we should wipe them out. And so if you say, oh, no, it has plausible deniability because he didn't say trans people, he said ideology. Okay, shoe on the other foot. Let's try. Oh, yeah, the left is not going to stop until Christian ideology is entirely erased from the earth. Does that sound good? You like that one? Until white ideology is wiped from the earth. Does that sound good? No, it doesn't sound good. It sounds terrible. Why does it sound terrible? Because you're obviously attacking that group, okay? And you're hiding behind one word, pretending that you don't mean to, but it's not, you're not even hiding anymore. Like Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying trans people are satanic. So, how is that not deeply, deeply hateful? So right wing, if you want us to have a reasonable conversation in this country, I'm not going to have conversations with the Max Right who are lunatics on this.
Okay, well, it's fine because no one's trying to have a conversation with you in the first place, Cenk. If you keep acting like this, I'm not going to talk to you, okay? That's fine. I'm fine with that. Deal. So Cenk begins right off the bat by affirming that the female ACLU lawyer is a man. He said he disagrees with the lawyer about transing 2-year-olds, but then declares that what I said is far, far worse. My opinion about an ideology is worse than physically castrating a 2-year-old. That's what he just said. Then Cenk wants to know how I would feel if he said that Christian ideology should be erased or white ideology should be erased. Well, I'm happy to answer that for you.
Cenk always goes to those two. Absolutely and utterly goes to. He can't go to any other thing or something like that to set up something tertiary so they can come from it the same angle. But of course, it has to be an attack.
So if you said that white ideology should be erased, I would be opposed to that idea, and because I would have to assume that you meant that you wanted to erase white people. I know you're going to say, oh, see, there, I got you. No, but that's because, Cenk, white ideology isn't a thing. It doesn't exist. There is no ideology shared by white people across the whole world. If you made that statement, you could only mean that you want to erase white people because there is no such thing as white ideology. Now, there is obviously such a thing as trans ideology. That is an actual thing. It's the ideology that Cenk himself mildly disagrees with by saying that he wouldn't want to trans a toddler. As for erasing Christian ideology, I would strongly disagree with that statement because Christian ideology or Christian teaching, which is what I would take that statement to mean, which, and by the way, if you wanted to switch it over and say trans rather than trans ideology, trans teaching, we could call it that too, okay? But when it comes to Christian teaching, Christian ideology, it's a positive force in the world. It has done immeasurable good for mankind. It has shaped Western civilization for the better. So not all ideologies are created equal. So there are things you could say about one ideology, and if you say it about that ideology, it's a fair thing to say, whereas if you said it about another one, it would not be fair. How could that be true? Well, because not all ideologies are the same. And on that point, I've got a question for you, Cenk. What if I said that white supremacist ideology should be erased? Would you object to that? Would you accuse me of calling for a genocide against white people? No, you wouldn't. In fact, you would wholeheartedly agree. And that's because you understand the distinction between people and ideologies. You understand that, obviously, your fundamental goal when you oppose an ideology is for it to eventually no longer exist. If you think an ideology is evil, if you think it does nothing but harm, if you think it hurts people, then you want it to be gone, to no longer exist, to be erased. Not by killing the people who profess the ideology, which would be not only wrong, but also, as history shows, a very ineffective way of actually erasing an ideology anyway. Instead, you want to rid the world of it by exposing it and defeating it and discrediting the ideas that it espouses. This is a distinction that I know you're smart enough to understand, but you pretend you don't in this case because you actually agree with trans ideology. That's the problem. You don't have a problem with the way I oppose it, but rather with the fact that I do, which I know because you start by fundamentally agreeing with the ideology when you affirm the manhood of somebody who is 100% female. Now, Cenk says that I'm a lunatic on the trans issue, even though I have been right about the issue for 10 years, while he's just now coming around to mildly criticizing some of the excesses of this, what he perceives to be excesses of this ideology. But even if his criticisms are weak and tentative and toothless, which they are, he is still inching ever so slightly in my direction. I have not come his direction even 1 centimeter. He is cautiously tiptoeing towards me on this topic while still condemning me as a lunatic on the same topic. Now, the case of Cenk Uygur's non-conversion conversion perfectly illustrates all of the reasons why conservatives must take these sorts of people with a giant boulder-sized chunk of salt. Now, it's of course possible that somebody who was once an extreme leftist might actually see the light. When that happens, we should embrace them with open arms and generous spirits. But if it's genuine, we should see on their part some amount of remorse. They should be willing to admit they were wrong. They should apologize to the people on our side who they have unfairly demeaned and slandered and villainized. If all of that happens, then I'll be the first to shake their hand and welcome the prodigal son as he returns. Yet even in that case, I would not immediately take that person and put them on stage and listen to their ideas like they're thought leaders of a movement they just joined 80 seconds ago.
And that's basically it. Cenk is basically saying that, okay, now I'm taking steps before that while saying other things in other areas, as he always has. Cenk always tries to play both sides against the middle when he gets stuck into a corner. And right now with this election, the way they were, I know they were bashing Biden, but anybody with any sense was bashing Biden, but they went wholeheartedly in with Kamala Harris, even knowing that she was a terrible candidate, and all the time preaching how Trump is Hitler and how all the rest of Trump supporters are Nazis as well. Thank you guys very much for joining me today. Like, share, subscribe, and join me next time. Later.